6, the last part of a series of unfortunate events. The Carnivorous Carnival, Book 9. I'll read chapters 12 and 13. This is the picture for chapter 12. Chapter 12. When the Butler orphans finally opened their eyes, they found that they had stumbled to the entrance of Madame Lulu's fortune-telling tent, with the initials VFD still staring out at them. Most of the carnival visitors had walked over to the lion pit to see the show, so the siblings were alone in the fading afternoon, and once again there was no one watching over them as they stood in front of the tent, trembling and crying quietly. The last time they had stood for so long at the tent's entrance, the decoration had seemed to change before their very eyes until they saw it was not a painting of an eye, but the insignia of an organization that might help them. Now they stood and stared again, hoping that something would change before their very eyes, until they saw what it was that they could do. But nothing seemed to change, no matter how hard they looked. The carnival remained silent, and the afternoon continued to creep toward the evening, and the insignia on the tent simply stared back at the weeping Baudelaires. "I wonder where the fan belt is," Violet said finally. Her voice was faint and almost hoarse, but her tears had stopped at last. "I wonder if it fell to the ground, or was thrown onto the tracks of the roller coaster, or if it ended up—" "How can you think about a fan belt at a time like this?" Claus asked, although his voice was not angry. Like his sister, he was still trembling inside the shirt they shared, and felt very tired, as if often the case after a long cry. "I don't want to think about anything else," Violet said. "I don't want to think about Madame Lulu and the lions, and I don't want to think about Count Olaf and the crowd, and I don't want to think about whether or not we did the right thing." "Right," Sunny said gently. "I agree," Claus said. "We did the best we could." "I'm not so sure," Violet replied. "I had the fan belt in my hand, and it was all we needed to finish the invention and escape from this awful place." "You couldn't finish the invention," Claus said. "We were surrounded by a crowd of people who wanted to see someone thrown to the lions. It's not our fault that she fell instead." "And bald," Sunny added. "But we made the crowd even more frantic," Violet said. "First we stole the show, and then we used mob psychology to get them excited about throwing somebody into the pit." "Count Olaf is the one who thought up this whole ghastly scheme," Claus said. "What happened to Madame Lulu is his fault, not ours." "We promised to take her with us," Violet insisted. "Madame Lulu kept her promise and didn't tell Count Olaf who we were, but we didn't keep ours." "We tried," Claus said. "We tried to keep ours." "Trying's not good enough," Violet said. "Are we going to try to find one of our parents? Are we going to try to defeat Count Olaf?" "Yes," Sunny said firmly, and wrapped her arms around Violet's leg. The eldest Baudelaire looked down at her sister, and her eyes filled with tears. "Why are we here?" she asked. "We thought we could put on disguises and get ourselves out of trouble, but we're worse off than when we began. We don't know what VFD stands for, we don't know where the snicket file is, and we don't know if one of our parents is really alive." "There are some things we might not know," Claus said, "but that doesn't mean we should give up. We can find out what we need to know. We can find out anything." Violet smiled through her tears. "You sound like a researcher," she said. The middle Baudelaire reached into his pocket and pulled out his glasses. "I am a researcher," he said, and stepped toward the entrance of the tent. "Let's get to work." "Guide," Sunny said, which meant, "I almost forgot about the archival library," and she followed her siblings through the flap in the tent. As soon as the Baudelaire orphans stepped inside, they saw Madame Lulu had made quite a few preparations for her escape with the children, and it made them very sad to think that she would never return to the fortune-telling tent to collect her things that she had waiting for her. Her disguise kit was all packed up again and waiting by the door so she could take it with her. There was a cardboard box standing next to the cupboard, filled with food that could be eaten on a journey. And laid out on the table next to Madame Lulu's replacement crystal ball and various parts of the lightning device she had dismantled, was a large piece of paper that had been badly torn and looked very old, but the Baudelaires saw at once that it could help them. "It's a map," Violet said. "It's a map of Mortman Mountains. She must have had it among her papers." Claus put his glasses on and peered at it closely. "Those mountains must be very cold this time of year," he said. "I didn't realize the altitude was so high." "Never mind altitude," Violet said. "Can you find the headquarters Lulu was talking about?" "Let's see," Claus said. "There's a star next to Plath Pass, but the key says that the star indicates a campground." "Key?" Sunny asked. "This chart in the corner of a map is called a key." Claus explained. "You see, the map maker explains what each symbol means so that the map doesn't get too cluttered. There's a black rectangle there in richer range," she said. "Over here. See? Over in the east? A black rectangle indicates hibernation grounds," Claus said. "There must be quite a few bears in the Mortman Mountains." Look, there are 5 hibernation grounds near Silent Springs, and a large cluster of them at the top of Paucity Peak. And here, Violet said, in the Valley of 4 Giraffes, where it looks like Madame Lulu spilled coffee. Valley of 4 Giraffes, Claus said. VFD, Sunny cried. The Baudelaires peered together at the spot on the map, and the Valley of 4 Giraffes was high up in the Mortman Mountains, where it would be very cold. The stricken stream began there and wound its way down to the sea in sagging curves through the hinterlands, and the map showed many, many hibernation grounds along the way. There was a small brown stain in the center of the valley where 4 gaps in the mountains came together, and where Lulu had probably spilled coffee, but there were no markings for her headquarters or anything else. Do you think it means something? Violet asked, or is it just a coincidence, like all the VFDs we've come across? I think the V in VFD stood for volunteer, Claus said. That's what we found written on the page of the Quagmire notebooks. And it's what Jock Snicket said. We know? Sunny asked, which meant, but where else could the headquarters be? There's no other marking in the map. Well, if VFD is a secret organization, Violet said, they might not put their headquarters on a map. Or it could be marked secretly, Claus said, and Lena to take a good look at the stain. Maybe this isn't just a stain, he said. Maybe it's a secret marking. Maybe Madame Lulu put some coffee here on purpose so she could find the headquarters, but nobody else could. I guess we'll have to travel there, Violet said with a sigh, and find out. How are we going to travel there? Claus said. We don't know where the fan belt is. We might be missing some parts, Violet replied, but that doesn't mean we should give up. I can build something else. You sound like an inventor, he said. Violet smiled and took her hair ribbon out of her pocket. I am an inventor, she said. I'll look around here and see if there's anything else we can use. Claus, you look under the table at the archival library. We better get out of the clothes we're sharing, Claus said, or we can't do 2 things at once. Claus said, Ingredients, Sunny said, which meant meanwhile I'll look through all this food and make sure we have everything we need to prepare meals. Good idea, Violet said. We better hurry before someone finds us. There you are, called a voice from the entrance to the tent, and the Baudelaires jumped. Violet hurriedly stuffed her ribbon back in her pocket, and Claus removed his glasses so they could turn around without revealing their disguise. Count Olaf and Esme Squalor were standing there together in the doorway of the tent, with their arms around one another, looking tired but happy, as if they were 2 parents coming home after a long day at work, instead of vicious villain and his scheming girlfriend coming into the fortune-teller's tent after an afternoon of violence. Esme Squalor was clutching a small boutique of ivy her boyfriend had apparently given her, and Count Olaf was holding a flaming torch, which was shining as brightly as his wicked eyes. I've been looking everywhere for you 2, he said. What are you doing in here? We decided to let all of you freaks join us, Esme said, even though you weren't very courageous at the lion's pit. That's very kind of you to offer, Violet said quickly, but you don't want cowards like us in your troop. Sure we do, Count Olaf said with a nasty smile. We keep losing assistants, and it's always good to have a few spare. I even asked the woman who runs the gift caravan to join us, but she was too worried about her precious figurines to know what opportunity was knocking. Besides, Esme said, stroking Olaf's hair, you don't really have a choice. We're going to burn this carnival down to eliminate all the evidence that we've been here. Most of the tents are already on fire, and the carnival visitors and carnival workers are running for their lives. If you don't join us, where could you possibly go? The Baudelaires looked at one another in dismay. I guess you're right, Claus said. Of course we're right, Esme said. Now get out of here and help us pack up the trunk. Wait a minute, Count Olaf said and strode over to the table. What's this? He demanded. It looks like a map. It is a map, Claus admitted with a sigh, wishing he had hidden it in his pockets. A map of Mortman Mountains. The Mortman Mountains, Count Olaf said, examining the map eagerly. Why, that's where we're heading. Lulu said if there was a parent alive, they'd be heading up there. Does the map show any headquarters on it? I think these black rectangles indicate headquarters, Esme said, peering over Olaf's shoulder. I'm pretty good at reading maps. No, they represent campgrounds, Olaf said, looking at the keep, but then his face broke out into a smile. Wait a minute, he said, and pointed to the stain on the Baudelaires had been examining. I haven't seen one of these in a long time, he said, stroking his scraggly chin. A small brown stain? Esme asked. You saw that this morning. This is a coded stain, Olaf explained. I was taught to use this on maps when I was a little boy. It's to mark a secret location without anyone else noticing it. Except a smashing genius, Esme said. I guess we're headed for the Valley of 4 Drafts. VFD, Count Olaf said and giggled. That's appropriate. Well, let's go. Is there anything else useful in here? The Baudelaires looked quickly at the table where the archival library was hidden. Underneath the black tablecloth decorated with silver stars was all the crucial information Madame Lulu had gathered to give her visitors what they wanted. The children knew that all sorts of important secrets could be found in the gathering of paper, and they shuddered to think what Count Olaf would do if he discovered all the secrets. No, Claus said finally, nothing else useful. Count Olaf frowned and kneeled down so that his face was right next to Claus's. Even without his glasses, the middle bottler could see that Count Olaf had not washed his one eyebrow for quite some time, and could smell his breath as he spoke. I think you're lying to me, the villain said, and waved the lit torch in Claus's face. My other head is telling the truth, Violet said. Then what is the food doing there? Count Olaf demanded, pointing to the cardboard box. Don't you think food would be useful for a long journey? The bottler sighed in relief. Grr, Sonny growled. Trouble compliments you on your cleverness, Claus said, and so do we. We hadn't noticed that box. That's why I'm the boss, Count Olaf said, because I'm smart and I have good eyesight. He laughed nastily and put the torch in Claus's hand. Now then, he said, I want you to light this tent on fire and then bring the box of food over to the car. Chabo, come with me. I'm sure I'll find something for you to sink your teeth into. Grr, Sonny said doubtfully. Chabo would prefer to stay with us, Violet said. I couldn't care less what Chabo would prefer, Olaf snarled, and picked up the youngest bottler as if she were a watermelon. Now get busy. Count Olaf and Esme Squalor walked out of the tent with Chabo, leaving the elder bottleiers alone with a flaming torch. We'd better pick up the box first, Claus said, and light the tent from the outside. Otherwise we'll be surrounded by flames in no time. Are we really going to follow Olaf's orders? Violet asked, looking at the table again. The archival library might have the answers to all our questions. I don't think we have a choice, Claus said. Olaf is burning down the whole carnival, and riding with him is our only chance to get to Mortman Mountains. You don't have time to invent something, and I don't have time to look through the library. We could find one of the other carnival employees, Violet said, and ask them if they would help us. Everyone either thinks we're freaks or murderers, Claus said. Sometimes even I think so. If we join Count Olaf, Violet said, we might become even more freakish and murderous. But if we don't join him, Claus said, where can we possibly go? I don't know, Violet said sadly, but this can't be the right thing to do. Maybe it's harum-scarum, Claus said, like Olivia said. Maybe it is, Violet said, and walked awkwardly with her brother to the cardboard box and picked it up. Claus held the torch, and the two bottleiers walked out of the fortune-telling tent for the last time. When they stepped out, still wearing the same pair of pants, it seemed as if the night had already fallen, although the air was black and not the blue of the famous hinterland sunset. But Violet and Claus realized that the air was filling with smoke. Looking around, they saw that many of the tents and caravans were already on fire, as Count Olaf had said, and the flames were billowing black smoke up into the sky. Around them, the last of the carnival visitors were rushing to escape Olaf's treachery, and in the distance, the siblings could hear the panic roars of the lions who were still trapped in the pit. This is the kind of violence I like, shouted the man with pimples on his face, coughing in the smoke as he ran. I prefer it when other people are in danger. Me too, said the reporter from the Daily Punctilio, running alongside of him. Olaf told me that the Baudelaires are responsible. I can see the headline now. Baudelaires continue their lives of crime. What kind of children would do such a terrible thing? Asked the man with pimpled chin. But Violet and Claus could not hear their answer over the voice of Count Olaf. Hurry up, you two-headed freak, he called from around the corner. If you don't come here right this minute, we're leaving without you. Grrr, Sonny growled frantically. And at the sound of their baby sister's disguised voice, the older Baudelaires threw the lit torch into the fortune-telling tent and ran toward Olaf's voice without looking back, although it wouldn't have mattered if they had looked. There was so much fire and smoke around them, one more burning tent wouldn't have made the carnival look any different. The only difference was that they would have known that part of the fire was their own devising, a phrase which here means, because of their part in Olaf's treachery. And although neither Violet nor Claus saw this with their own eyes, they knew it in their hearts, and I doubt they would ever forget it. When the elder Baudelaires rounded the corner, they saw that Olaf's other henchmen were already waiting at the long black automobile, which was parked in front of the freak's caravan. Hugo, Colette, and Kevin were crowded in the back seat with the two white-faced women, while Esme Squalor sat in the front with Sonny on her lap. The hook-handed man took the box out of the older Baudelaire's hands and threw it in the trunk, while Count Olaf pointed to the caravan with its whip, which looked much shorter and rough around the edges. You two will ride in that, he said. We're going to attach it to the automobile and pull you along with us. Isn't there room in this car? Violet asked nervously. Don't be ridiculous, the hook-handed man said with a sneer. It's too crowded. Good thing Colette is a contortionist, so she can curl up into a ball at our feet. Chavo already gnawed my whip down so it could be used as a connecting rope, Count Olaf said. I'll just tie the caravan to the car with a double slip knot, and then we'll ride off into the sunset. Excuse me, Violet said. I know of a knot called the Devil's Tongue that I think would hold better. And if I remember the map correctly, Claus said, we should ride east until we find Stricken Stream, so we should drive that way away from the sunset. Yes, Count Olaf said quickly. That's what I meant. Tie it yourself if you want. I'll go start the engine. Olaf tossed the rope to Claus while the hook candy man reached into the trunk again and brought out a pair of walkie-talkies the children remembered from when they were living in Olaf's home. Take one of those, he said, putting one in Violet's hand, so we can contact you if we need to tell you something. Hurry up, Count Olaf snapped, talking to the other walkie-talkie. The air is filling with smoke. The villain and the henchman got into the automobile, and Violet and Claus knelt down to attach the caravan. I can't believe I'm using this knot to help Count Olaf, she said. It feels like I'm using my inventing skills to participate in something wicked. We're all participating, Claus said glumly. Sunny used her teeth to turn that whip into a connecting rope, and I used my map skills to tell Olaf which direction to head. At least we'll get there, too, Violet said, and maybe one of our parents will be waiting for us. There, the knot's tied. Let's get in the caravan. I wish we were riding with Sunny, Claus said. We are, Violet said. We're not getting to Mortimer Mountains the way we want, but we're getting there, and that's what counts. I hope so, Claus said, and his sister stepped into the freak's caravan and shut the door. Count Olaf started the engine of the car, and the caravan began to rock gently back and forth as the automobile pulled them away from the Carnival. The hammock swayed above the two siblings, and the rack of clothing creaked beside them, but the knot Violet had tied held fast, and the two vehicles began traveling in the direction Claus had pointed. We might as well get comfortable, Violet said. We'll be traveling a long time. All night, at least, Claus said, and probably most of the next day. I hope they'll stop and share the food. Maybe we can make some hot chocolate later, Violet said. With cinnamon, Claus said, smiling as he thought of Sunny's recipe. But what should we do in the meantime? Violet sighed, and she and her brother sat down in the chair so she could lay her head on the table, which was shaking slightly as the caravan headed out into the hinterlands. The eldest Baudelaire put down the walkie-talkie next to the set of dominoes. Let's just sit, she said, and think. Claus nodded in agreement, and the two Baudelaires sat and thought for the rest of the afternoon, as the automobile pulled them farther and farther away from the burning carnival. Violet tried to imagine what the VFD headquarters might look like, and hoped that one of their parents would be there. Claus tried to imagine what Olaf and his troop were talking about, and hoped that Sunny was not too frightened. And both the older Baudelaires thought about all that had happened at the Calgary Carnival, and wondered whether or not they had done the right things. They had disguised themselves in order to find the answers to their questions, and now the answers were burning up under Madame Lou's table as her archival library went up in smoke. They had encouraged their coworkers to find employment someplace where they wouldn't be considered freaks, and now they had joined Count Olaf's evil troop, and they had promised Madame Lou that they would take her with them so she could lead them to VFD and become a noble person again. But she had fallen into the pit of lions and became nothing but a meal. Violet and Claus thought about all of the trouble they were in, and wondered if it was all due to the simple misfortune, or if some of it was all their own devising. These were not the most pleasant thoughts in the world, but it still felt good to sit and think about them, instead of hiding and lying and frantically thinking up plans. It was peaceful to sit and think in the freak's caravan, even when the carnival tilted slightly as they reached the beginning of the Mortimer Mountains and began to head uphill. It was so peaceful to sit and think that both Violet and Claus felt as if they were waking up from a long sleep when Count Olaf's voice came out of the walkie-talkie. Are you there? Olaf asked. Press the red button and speak to me. Violet rubbed her eyes, picked up the walkie-talkie, and held it so both her and her brother could hear. We're good, she said. We're here, she said. Good, Count Olaf replied, because I wanted to tell you that I learned something else from Madame Lulu. What did you learn? Claus asked. There was a pause, and the two children could hear cruel peals of laughter coming from the small devices in Violet's hand. I learned that you are the Baudelaires, Count Olaf cried in triumph. I learned that you three brats followed me here and tricked me with sneaky disguises. I'm too clever for you. Olaf began to laugh, but over his laughter the two siblings could hear another sound that made them feel as shaky as the caravan. It was Sunny, and she was whimpering in fear. Don't hurt her, Violet cried. Don't you dare hurt her. Hurt her? Count Olaf snarled. Why, I wouldn't dream of hurting her. After all, I need one orphan to steal the fortune. First, I'm going to make sure both of your parents are dead, and then I'm going to use Sunny to become very, very rich. No, I wouldn't worry about this buck-toothed twerp. Not yet. If I were you, I'd worry about yourselves. Say bye-bye to your sister, Bada Brats. But we're tied together, Claus said. We hitched our caravan to you. Look out the window, Count Olaf said, and hung up the walkie-talkie. Violet and Claus looked at one another and then staggered to their feet and moved the curtain away from the window. The curtain parted as if they were watching a play, and if I were you, I would pretend that this is a play instead of a book, perhaps a tragedy written by William Shakespeare, and that you are leaving the theater early to go home and hide under a sofa, because you will recall that there was a certain expression that, I'm sorry to say, must be used 3 times before this story is over, and it is in the 13th chapter when this expression will be used for the 3rd time. The chapter is very short because the end of this story happened so quickly that it does not make many words to describe. But the chapter does contain the 3rd occasion requiring the expression, the belly of the beast, and you will be wise to leave before the chapter begins because the time didn't count. Chapter 13. With the curtain parted, Violet and Claus looked out the window and gasped at what they saw. In front of them was Count Olaf's long black automobile, winding its crooked way up the road toward the peaks of Mortman Mountains, with the freak's caravan tied to the bumper. They could not see their baby sister, who was trapped in the front seat with Olaf and his villainous girlfriend, but they could imagine how frightened and desperate she was. But the Baudelaires also saw something that made them frightened and desperate, and it was something that they had never thought to imagine. Hugo was leaning out the back of the window of the automobile, his hump hidden in the oversized coat, Esme Squalor had given him as a present, and he was holding tight to Colette's ankles. The contortionist had twisted her body around the back of the car so that her head was lying in the middle of the trunk, between the 2 bullet holes that had provided air for the Baudelaires on their way to Caligari Carnival. Like her coworker, Colette was holding tight to someone's ankles, the ambidextrous ankles of Kevin, so that all 3 of the Madame Lulu former employees were in a sort of human chain. At the end of the chain were Kevin's hands, which were gripping a long rusty knife. Kevin looked up at Violet and Claus and gave them a triumphant grin, and brought the knife down as hard as he could on the knot Violet had tied. The devil's tongue is a very strong knot, and normally it would take a while for a knife to saw through it, even if it was a very sharp knife. But the equal strength in Kevin's 2 arms meant that the knife moved with a freakish power instead of normally, and in an instant the knot was split in 2. "No!" Violet yelled. "Sonny!" Claus screamed. With the caravan unhitched, the 2 vehicles began going in opposite directions. Count Olaf's car continued to wind its way up the mountains, but without anything pulling it, the caravan began to roll back down, the way a grapefruit will roll down a flight of stairs if you let it go, and there was no way for Violet or Claus to steer or stop the caravan from inside. The Baudelaires screamed again, all 3 of them, Violet, Claus, alone in the rattling caravan, and studying the car full of villains as the 2 vehicles slipped further and further away from each other. But even though Count Olaf was getting closer and closer to what he wanted, and the older Baudelaires were getting further and further away, it seemed to the children that all 3 siblings were ending up at the same place. Even as Count Olaf's automobile slipped out of view and the caravan began to slip on the bumpy road, it seemed to the Baudelaire orphans that they were all slipping into the belly of the beast. And that time, I'm sorry to say, counted very, very much. And that's the end.